welcome back to Clearcut. A woman claims that a video of her bashing Muslims that's gone viral was taken out of context. She claims she was provoked into talking about Muslims and that the video does not show the full story. That's according to a Fox affiliate in D.C. But the video shows the woman telling a Muslim person that she wishes she was not allowed in the country. Meanwhile, hate crimes against Muslims are on the rise in the U.S. There's now 70% more crimes that have been reported in only 3 years. That's according to a new report. I-24 correspondent Tal Heinrich has more.
When members of the Islamic community of Fort Pierce, Florida, woke up to their mosque set ablaze on September 12, 2016, they witnessed their place of prayer become a part of a disturbing statistic. The mosque burning was one of 2,213 anti-Muslim bias incidents in the United States last year. The Empowerment of Hate. This is the title of a new report published by the Council on American Islamic Relations. It found a 57% increase in the number of anti-Muslim hate crimes in 2016. Compare that to only a 5% increase from 2014 to 2015.
In Ohio, an armed man shot a 16-year-old student who was walking home. The student was wearing an Islamic head covering called a kufi, and the perpetrator yelled terrorist at him before pulling the trigger.
From assaults and street harassment to employment discrimination, the accounting includes a wide variety of bias incidents.
Unfortunately, these kind of incidents aren't always perpetrated by individuals. Just prior to the presidential election, we saw a rise in FBI visits to law-abiding Muslims, asking them if they are aware of any possible attacks on the United States. We didn't see the same kind of visits to other communities.
Other examples of those biased crimes include letters mailed to mosques or even placed at the homes and vehicles of Muslims that contain threats of violence. Kill all Muslims. Death to you and your kind. Foreigner, go home. CARE says the sharp increase in anti-Muslim incidents that began in 2014 has been in part attributed to President Trump. The advocacy group pointed at the president's focus on eradicating militant Islamist groups and stoking anti-immigrant rhetoric. When during his 2016 campaign to run for president, then candidate Trump said this.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
The report says when Donald Trump became president of the United States on January 20th, 2017, he brought an unprecedented record of conditioning audiences to fear Muslims. This supports a different report from earlier this year issued by the Southern Poverty Law Center. It shows that the number of anti-Muslim hate groups has nearly tripled in 2016. Tal Heinrich, I-24 News.
And for more on this very serious issue, we bring in Dr. Zudi Jasser, the founder and president of American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us. So
it's good to be with you.
Thank you. What do you think are some of the major factors for a surge in hate crimes in the last few years?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for covering this. You know, as an American Muslim, there's nothing that breaks my heart more than to see some of the roots of what America stands for start to change. But I will tell you that, yes, there have been some attacks. I mean, in Quebec, I know that's not America, but in Canada, there was an attack that killed 6 Muslims in a mosque, and that's probably the worst example of what we've seen. Now, I will protest a bit of the facts that were presented. The Council on American Islamic Relations does not have a lot of credibility when it comes to identifying these things. The Corey Saylor, who was interviewed in the piece that you just showed, basically said that we proved what we already knew. So you basically have the same organization that stokes this sort of division in America, which lives off of identity politics, using these hate crimes as a mechanism to get fundraising, as a mechanism to, I think, in many ways, radicalize our community. And what they forget is that if you look at anti-Semitic events that occur, attacks that occur, there's still more of those than against Muslims. Now, the spike against Muslims has been much more so in the last year or two. And I would say that a lot of it we should take some responsibility for, in that we are not doing that much to show that we're leading the solution. Not that that's an excuse, but the identity politics and the apologetics and the denial that comes from Muslims makes Americans often more xenophobic and more fearful. And I think the best way to melt away xenophobia is for Americans to realize that we take ownership and we're the best solution to the radical Islamist threat.
But how hard is it when you have a candidate for president who, again, became our president, saying on the campaign trail that he wants a Muslim ban? How does that kind of thing play into the xenophobia that already exists and permeates the culture?
This is one of the reasons, even though I'm a conservative, I had difficulty with a lot of the language that candidate Trump used. I think if you look at the executive order that he wrote, the word Muslim and ban were not in it, and yet it was odd that the courts were holding him accountable for things he said in the campaign. Yes, when he's interviewed on CNN as a candidate and said that Islam hates us, I shrugged my shoulders at the fact that it's an ideology. It doesn't hate us. There are Muslims that love us and Muslims that don't, and we need to identify the Islamists. If only he had been able to be more articulate in these things. And I think this is very important for our leaders to separate Islam from Islamism, from Muslims from Islamists.
So
Islamism is a political movement that has those root causes that we need to address.
So, Dr. Jasser, what needs to happen to help turn the tide?
Number one is real statistics and not just sort of this exaggerated response. Number two is to not just say it's only about Muslims. There is some increase in xenophobia against all sects, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, and others. Third is for Muslims to lead the security protection of America so that Americans aren't as fearful. Mm-hmm. And fourth is not to allow these identity groups, which are Islamists by definition, to define the American Muslim narrative, and rather to make Muslims appear and be more realistically diverse in our ideology, not make Islam and Muslims into a racial identity and feed into other identity movements like we saw on the left with Black Lives Matter, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of solutions that need to go to move forward. Right. But if we saw, as we saw in Europe with Brexit, et cetera, hyper-nationalism can be a problem. We need to come back to real nationalism of constitutional social contract of freedom and liberty that brings in all likes, races, religions, et cetera.
What America is all about. All right, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, thank you so much.